Born in 384 BC in the Macedonian region of northeastern Greece in the small city of Stagira, whence the moniker the Stagirite, which one still occasionally encounters in Aristotelian scholarship, Aristotle was sent to Athens at about the age of 17 to study in Plato's academy, then a preeminent place of learning in the Greek world. Once in Athens, Aristotle remained associated with the academy until Plato's death in 347, at which time he left for Assos, in Asia Minor, on the northwest coast of present-day Turkey. There he continued the philosophical activity he had begun in the academy, but in all likelihood also began to expand his researches into marine biology. He remained at Assos for approximately 3 years, when, evidently upon the death of his host Hermias, a friend and former academic who had been the ruler of Assos, Aristotle moved to the nearby coastal island of Lesbos. There he continued his philosophical and empirical researches for an additional 2 years, working in conjunction with Theophrastus, a native of Lesbos who is also reported in antiquity to have been associated with Plato's academy. While in Lesbos, Aristotle married Pythias, the niece of Hermias, with whom he had a daughter, also named Pythias. In 343, upon the request of Philip, the king of Macedon, Aristotle left Lesbos for Pella, the Macedonian capital, in order to tutor the king's 13-year-old son, Alexander, the boy who was eventually to become Alexander the Great. Although speculation concerning Aristotle's influence upon the developing Alexander has proven irresistible to historians, in fact little concrete is known about their interaction. On the balance, it seems reasonable to conclude that some tuition took place, but that it lasted only 2 or 3 years, when Alexander was aged from 13 to 15. By 15, Alexander was apparently already serving as a deputy military commander for his father, a circumstance undermining, if inconclusively, the judgment of those historians who conjecture a longer period of tuition. Be that as it may, some suppose that their association lasted as long as 8 years. It is difficult to rule out that possibility decisively, since little is known about the period of Aristotle's life from 341 to 335. He evidently remained a further 5 years in Stagira or Macedon before returning to Athens for the second and final time, in 335. In Athens, Aristotle set up his own school in a public exercise area dedicated to the god Apollo Lykios, whence its name, the Lyceum. Those affiliated with Aristotle's school later came to be called Peripatetics, probably because of the existence of an ambulatory, peripatos, on the school's property adjacent to the exercise ground. Members of the Lyceum conducted research into a wide range of subjects, all of which were of interest to Aristotle himself: botany, biology, logic, music, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, cosmology, physics, the history of philosophy, metaphysics, psychology, ethics, theology, rhetoric, political history, government and political theory, and the arts. In all these areas, the Lyceum collected manuscripts, thereby, according to some ancient accounts, assembling the first great library of antiquity. During this period, Aristotle's wife, Pythias, died, and he developed a new relationship with Herpyllis, perhaps like him a native of Stagira, though her origins are disputed, as is the question of her exact relationship to Aristotle. Some suppose that she was merely his slave. Others infer from the provisions of Aristotle's will that she was a freed woman and likely his wife at the time of his death. In any event, they had children together, including a son, Nicomachus, named for Aristotle's father and after whom his Nicomachean Ethics is presumably named. After 13 years in Athens, Aristotle once again found cause to retire from the city in 323. Probably his departure was occasioned by a resurgence of the always simmering anti-Macedonian sentiment in Athens, which was free to come to the boil after Alexander succumbed to disease in Babylon during that same year. Because of his connections to Macedon, Aristotle reasonably feared for his safety and left Athens, remarking, as an oft-repeated ancient tale would tell it, that he saw no reason to permit Athens to sin twice against philosophy. He withdrew directly to Chalcis, on Euboea, an island off the Attic coast, and died there of natural causes the following year, in 322. 3. 2. The Aristotelian Corpus. Character and Primary Divisions. Aristotle's writings tend to present formidable difficulties to his novice readers. To begin, he makes heavy use of unexplained technical terminology, and his sentence structure can at times prove frustrating. Further, on occasion a chapter or even a full treatise coming down to us under his name appears haphazardly organized, if organized at all. Indeed, in several cases, scholars dispute whether a continuous treatise currently arranged under a single title was ever intended by Aristotle to be published in its present form or was rather stitched together by some later editor employing whatever principles of organization he deemed suitable. For this helps explain why students who turn to Aristotle, after first being introduced to the supple and mellifluous prose on display in Plato's dialogues, often find the experience frustrating. Aristotle's prose requires some acclimatization. All the more puzzling, then, is Cicero's observation that if Plato's prose was silver, Aristotle's was a flowing river of gold. AC PR 38.119, cf. top 1.3. Or 1, 249. Cicero was arguably the greatest prose stylist of Latin and was also without question an accomplished and fair-minded critic of the prose styles of others writing in both Latin and Greek. We must assume, then, that Cicero had before him works of Aristotle other than those we possess. In fact, we know that Aristotle wrote dialogues, presumably while still in the academy, and in their few surviving remnants we are afforded a glimpse of the style Cicero describes. In most of what we possess, unfortunately, we find work of a much less polished character. Rather, Aristotle's extant works read like what they very probably are: lecture notes, drafts first written and then reworked, ongoing records of continuing investigations, and, generally speaking, in-house compilations intended not for a general audience, but for an inner circle of auditors. These are to be contrasted with the exoteric writings Aristotle sometimes mentions, his more graceful compositions intended for a wider audience, Paul 1278b30, E 1217b22, 1218b34. Unfortunately, then, we are left for the most part, though certainly not entirely, with unfinished works in progress rather than with finished and polished productions. Still, many of those who persist with Aristotle come to appreciate the unembellished directness of his style. More importantly, the unvarnished condition of Aristotle's surviving treatises does not hamper our ability to come to grips with their philosophical content. His 31 surviving works, that is, those contained in the corpus Aristotelicum of our medieval manuscripts that are judged to be authentic, all contain recognizably Aristotelian doctrine, and most of these contain theses whose basic purport is clear, even where matters of detail and nuance are subject to exegetical controversy. These works may be categorized in terms of the intuitive organizational principles preferred by Aristotle. He refers to the branches of learning as